Hi, everyone. I'm Rejoice, and welcome to Umatta Consultant Podcast today. If today is your first time on our show, please make sure to subscribe to all of our social media channels, especially Spotify. So, today we have the special privilege of speaking with Chris. Chris is the CEO of Hope Tape. I would love for him to also introduce himself as he sees fit so we can dive right into the questions. So, Chris, the mic is yours, please.
Yeah, so I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm kind of have my fingers in lots of different businesses, and I'm most well known for having a business for 20 plus years. It was called People G2, where we kind of got a lot of attention and I don't know, we're kind of known for what we did over there around culture. We were one of the very first companies. I think we were the first company to ever go fully remote and survive. And this was prior to the pandemic back in 2009. So that was sort of my largest organization, 4,500 people when I sold the organization. And so now I do lots of keynotes and consulting and helping organizations while also helping and running some different startups that I have. So I'm an ADD CEO. That's probably me. So.
Oh my goodness, that is so great of an introduction. And we're excited to dive into your mind of an entrepreneur, a sole entrepreneur. My first question for you, Chris, you've built an incredible career as you just described, a CEO, author, speaker, startups. Can you share a bit about your journey and what inspired you to sort of focus on company culture and also remote work? How did you get here?
Well, all of those things happened either by accident or out of necessity. So, with culture, I realized that our organization was never going to get to where I wanted it to be if we didn't change how we were going to work and change how we operated. We were sort of operating the same way we did when there was 10 people in a little office when I very first started. And now all of a sudden we had all these people and it didn't work. And I was complaining and upset, and the recession hit and all of these things happened, and it was like this light bulb moment of what got us here isn't going to get us there, right? We have to change how that's going to be. Now, what we were going to change to, I mean, imagine if someone came to you and said, guess what, you get to be a superhero, which one do you want to be? And you're like, I don't know. Let me go back and figure out like all of the different superpowers and what are the different things I could be or not be. And like, I couldn't answer that question immediately. And I had to go back, and I spent a lot of time researching and really thinking about what is a good culture,
Hmm.
right? And what is it that we want to be, and how do we think about that? And how do we, you know, create that space not only for me to say what I want, but for my people to say what they want. And so that kind of went down that journey. Now, remote work, we were, like I said, recession hit. We lost 40% of our business, and we went fully remote to save the company. We did not do it because we thought it was a better way to work or we thought it was cool. It was like, let's get rid of the lease. Let's get rid of all the expenses. Let's send everybody home. We'll probably bring them back at some point. And then 2 weeks into it, everyone had called me and said, this is amazing. Please don't ever make us go back in the office. And we were remote ever since, ever since that point.
Right. It's so true. Reflecting back during the 2020, so many companies made such drastic decisions that end up being a good thing in the long run, especially people working in home and also having some work-life balance. Chris,
Yeah.
you often say that culture is the strategy, which is a bold statement. For leaders listening today on this podcast, what does it really mean in practice to you?
All of your decisions have to be people decisions. And so does the organization work for everyone? Like to say, does it, how do we make work work? Does it work for the brand new employee? Does it work for Gen Z? Does it work for working, parents and single parents? Does it work for people who've been in the organization a long time? Does it work for leaders? Does it work for the owners? Like, if you get it right, every group should feel like it can work for them. That doesn't mean every employee is going to work out. It doesn't mean every employee is a fit. But, if you're getting the right people in and they're a good fit, then we need to make sure that work is working for them on a larger scale, or whatever category they fit. We realized during the pandemic that, like, people who were living by themselves and
Mm,
people who were living with one other person, whether that was a roommate or that was a spouse or a partner or whatever, like, those two groups had totally different needs
right.
during the pandemic than the people who had kids at home
Mhm.
and maybe a partner or a spouse, or the other group was multi-generational. So, like, grandparents moved in and aunts and uncles and cousins, and, like, people, like, got together and, like, all lived in their house together. There are challenges, right? So if I thought about our employees as one group, I would have radically failed at least half
Mm,
of the people. And what we learned was that, like, the people who had very little people in their space during the pandemic, they wanted trivia Tuesdays, and they wanted beer Friday, and they wanted all these ways to connect, right? And they wanted
yeah.
to talk about their feelings. And and then our people who had, like, a lot of people in the home were like, leave me alone.
Yes.
I don't want to go to that. I don't have time for this. I don't have bandwidth. Like, my kid is playing, grandma's on Netflix and the kids are on Zoom for school, and I'm trying to do a conference call, and it's glitching out. Like, so it was amazing how we had to think about them differently. And when we did that, we were able to support them in ways in which that matched their situation, right? So if you're thinking about people constantly in your business, and it's not just your employees, you're thinking about your people are also your clients, people are also your vendors, people are the family members of the people who work for you. Like, if you're thinking about that all the time, then that is the strategy. Yes, you got to have something to sell that somebody wants to buy, but, like, once you've kind of figured that out, being in business is all about being with people. And if you don't have that figured out, you're in a really hard time.
Exactly. Sometimes people refer it to the people strategy, but it's a business strategy, as you're saying. Awesome. So, Chris, what are some common misconceptions leaders have about building a strong culture, as you're describing, especially when teams are distributed?
Well, there's a lot of sort of things I think that people kind of get wrong. The first is they often think of themselves as problem solvers. And so when you run around the office or you're running around with your team and you're trying to find problems so that you can solve them, ultimately, and this is old saying that I like to repeat, it's what you focus on grows. And so if you're focused on problems, you're going to find more problems, and you're going to be in problems, and then you're going to go home and complain to your family or your spouse, your partner, whatever, that all you did all day long was deal with problems. Well, guess what? That's what you focused on. There are always problems and things that could get better, but the better leaders and the best organizations, they focus on what's working first. So, what are my best employees doing to be successful? Do I know the answer to that question? Or am I spending all day in problems and dealing with the employees who aren't meeting my expectations? Because if you put all your time and energy on them, they're getting all your time and energy. You put them on your best people and you're essentially ignoring the problem people, they're either going to go or they're going to change their habits and behaviors because they want your attention. They see, if I do a good job, if I do these things that these employees are doing, I get attention, I get what I want, I get career advancement, I get more money, whatever. So it doesn't mean we don't ever deal with it. I'm not saying we ignore the problems, but our first thought should be, why is that working? And do I understand that? Why is that person so good? Do I understand that? So that we can do more of that, right? And that's a big shift for people.
Hmm.
It's a big shift. I think the second one is probably, most of us are raised by people, parents, grandparents, teachers, coaches, who tell us to do something and expect us to do it because they said so, right?
Yes.
And that makes sense when you're a little kid, because if you put your hand in the fire, you're going to burn it. And, when your parents tell you not to do it, they expect you to listen because they're trying to keep you safe. And in school, that's about the only way the teachers can manage the situation, is to tell everyone to be quiet and to do it. But that system doesn't work when you have adults in a company. Command and control no longer works. I mean, there are situations, maybe in a factory, and there are outliers, but in most like modern day workplaces, it doesn't work. And if you try command and control, what you get is a bunch of jerk teenagers as employees. You don't get the adult versions of them. You start getting the passive aggressive teenager version of them,
Right.
because they don't want to be told what to do, and they don't want to be talked to that way, and they don't want to be, they want to be a part of the conversation, and they want to be a part of the growth, and they want to be elevated as an equal. And so I would always really push on my leaders every day to think about their people as their equal. And if you treat them as your equal, and you talk to them like you would someone who is, so let's just say there's a bunch of vice presidents all in a room, they would all talk to each other one way.
Right.
They walk out of that room and talk to their people differently. That's not good. I need you to talk to your people like you talk to the VPs, your fellow VP. Like, you should be talking to them like they're an equal. And what you notice is that people step up, right? People feel they appreciate that energy, and they feel like you believe in them and you trust them, and maybe you can't tell them everything you could tell a peer, but like, are you treating them the same? And so I think those two fundamental issues are what leaders get wrong. That's like the two biggest glaring things I see when I walk into a company, when someone's hired me to come in and help them make their culture better, help them with engagement scores, help them grow. I walk in and you see managers, command and control, and we see them walking around looking literally, wherever they can, looking for problems to solve. I mean, that's not the energy we need.
Yes. So a couple of things you said sort of resonated with me, and I'm so appreciative that you highlight these concepts, because in business school, there's theory out there that the more problems you solve as a leader, the more you're recognized in your company for growth
Mm-hmm.
and development. So it kind of sounds like many leaders, executive leaders, have this mindset that I need to be problem solving. I need to be the expert, subject matter expert in this area. I need to coach my people. I need to develop them. And that's how you sort of get recognition. I wonder how that could be sort of broken apart in business schools, or maybe in training, executive trainings, because it's common out there a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mindset shift. Instead of us thinking about how many problems to solve, we so there's a whole framework around, it's called appreciative inquiry, and they have a 4D process. And so there's a whole thing around, how do you dream about what you actually want? Where do you actually want the company to be? There are problems, and you could spend all of your time solving those problems. But where do I really want my company to be in a year, or in 6 months, or next month, or whatever it is? And then how do I design that? Right? So we've dreamed it, we've designed it. How do we discover what's really possible? And then how do we create the mechanisms and the practices and all of that for the destiny? How do we really make those things happen? And so if we think about that way, problems will disappear. Things
Mm,
will go away. So I'll give you a really, really practical example. It is not uncommon for companies to, or for back when I had my larger organization, for them to come to me and say, listen, we've got this client, we screwed up, we had this problem, they're really upset, we've had like 9 calls, like it's gotten to the point now where the CEO needs to get on, right? This is one of those situations. And so I would get on the call, or maybe customer service would be like, this cut that we just can't figure out how to make them happy, and I would hop on to see if we could help. And so the first thing I would do is ask them and say, hey, just just so I understand, before we talk about what happened, just so I understand, what are we doing right? What are we doing well for you so that I can put that over here and we don't have to worry about that? And they would go through this laundry list of things they loved about our company, right? Now they came in hot, like a 9 or a 10 math. And here they are giving me a list of all the wonderful things that we do. And what I notice is that the moment they finish that list, they are now a 6 or a 5. They're not so mad anymore, right?
Makes sense.
So we're focusing on what's working first. And then I go, okay, great, I understand that. Now, how do I help you, you know, solve this issue or whatever? And then when we do that, we're not trying to get the client back to where they were. So this is a big mistake that leaders make, is that the client was here, they were at point M, right, on the spectrum, and then something happened and they got angry and they went back to L, let's say. Okay, we're not trying to get them back to M. What we want to do is talk to them and hear them and understand their business and understand what they're doing and get a fresh take on what is really going on with that person and their business. And then make suggestions on how we might go work going forward. And maybe we get them to N or O or P or Q, right? Maybe we actually, this is a moment for us to radically improve the relationship and the work that we're doing. I mean, I've gone in, brought that client down and sold them on new services because they told me they were doing all this new stuff. And I'm like, well, then you need these other products we're doing. Like we can, oh my gosh, I didn't know you did that. Yeah, we can solve this problem and that problem. Yeah, and we'll give you this one for free because, we screwed up over here. And next thing you know, like that client, we helped them, again, not return back to where they were, but get them farther along by really listening. And again, that's being people first, right? Really listening to what was happening, because they may have signed up with us 2 years ago and their business has changed and we've not really had that deep conversation with them since.
Right.
To really understand, maybe their business has grown, they have more people, they're doing a new thing, whatever. And so that's how you practically think about it. If I think, how do I solve this client's problem? Oh, you were mad because the invoice came in wrong? Cool. Let me fix that. Now the invoice will come in right. I got them back where they were. Bye, client. And we're done. That's a wildly missed opportunity.
Great points. Great points. I agree with you. It's the understanding the company and the clients or the employee that's in front of you to sort of ascertain what opportunities you can get from them too. Chris, what have you learned about sustaining high performance in remote or hybrid teams?
Well, you have to really think about how you meet in very different ways. So we cannot take the cadence of meetings from a traditional we're all in one office setting and try to make it work for people who are suddenly now in different time zones. So if you're in a 3 or 4 time zone difference, then meetings are all about how do we really determine which meetings do what.
Hmm.
When we're hybrid and remote, we need certain meetings to just get things done, certain meetings to connect, certain meetings to fill people in. And we have to be really, really explicit about what that meeting is and what is the intention of that meeting, because it's a little bit different. We can like you and I could be in the same company and I might bump into you 5 minutes before the meeting and I can catch up with you and find out what's going on in your life and this and that, right? But on a virtual meeting, suddenly I'll pop up on Zoom, right? We didn't have that 5 minutes before. And now we're trying to shove everything into every meeting. We're trying to figure out where everybody's at. We're trying to catch up with everyone's life. And it's too difficult. Or maybe we never do that. Maybe it's all business all the time. And like we feel disconnected because we don't really know what's going on with people. So we have to be very intentional about designing meetings very differently in hybrid and remote. Now, if we have people working out more than 4 time zones apart, so 5 and up,
Mm-hmm.
then we're in asynchronous work. And
Hmm.
now we have to redesign how we update each other and how we communicate around the work. Because if I'm working while you're sleeping and then you come in, how does that handoff happen? How
Mm-hmm.
do you know what happened while you were sleeping and I was working? How do we do that handoff so that we don't miss things, so that we don't duplicate work,
Right.
that we know what happened? And so that's a complexity that obviously we don't have to deal with if we're all in the same office. So really getting meetings right and getting that coordination in, if we do that, the science says remote and hybrid will kick your butt. Will
Mm.
kick the traditional company's butt all day long from a performance, productivity, and profitability standpoint. But most people don't get that right. And so then they say, well, it's not as good. We need our people in the office because that's how they collaborate. Well, it's because your meetings suck. That's why you're not doing as well. But so if you're getting the meetings right is really the most important thing.
I certainly agree with you. I think the pushback from remote work is because it's not structured the way it could be. Have you found different techniques, and even looking ahead with AI, how do you think it's going to implement or engage teams remotely?
AI is certainly has the possibility of really helping us improve work. It also has the potential to really screw work up. Um, I think on the negative side, it's very possible that AI could like be reading our emails and then responding for us, and reading our chats and responding for us. And like, then do I really know what's going on? Do I really have any sense of what's happening? Right. And that could force us to be like, I have to be in front of you, physically in front of you, to believe that you actually are going to hear me and understand what I'm saying. Right. If
Yeah.
AI is taken over and is just like the AI bots are talking to the AI bots, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the negative side of it. We also know that people who are sort of using AI to do sort of very simple tasks um, are actually learning less. And so if they're using it for really deep work, it's different. But if they're using it for very shallow work all the time, they actually are retaining less. They're not learning as much. And so those are the problem sides. On the positive side, it certainly can allow us to think about employees being more about their skills
Hmm.
and about specific jobs and specific tasks. So instead of hiring someone to be a customer service agent, we
Mm-hmm.
might hire someone, you know, I, I don't know what the right term would be, but like, soldier 1, 2, 3, but like their job could totally change every day. And you have the AI tools and ability to go
Mm-hmm.
and do that and to flex and to move. Like, do we need you a little bit in sales today? And do we need you a little in
Mm-hmm.
customer service tomorrow? And do we need you to go help with bookkeeping? And like maybe the person who has a lot of skill and a lot of potential can move around I guess a better term might be a utility player, which is like a baseball term. Maybe that person can play different positions every game. And I think we might see a lot more of that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Instead of putting someone in a dedicated title in a dedicated department with a dedicated job description, we may get really wonky and just be like, let's move you around all the time based on where we need you, because you have that backbone of AI to help you very quickly on any of the little things that maybe would have taken us 3 weeks to onboard you about. Like that, we don't need that anymore. Like you can get the answer in a split second and go. So that could really allow people to be very versatile and to be very important to the organization, and to eliminate that, like, well, we don't need these 10 people. No, we can take those 10 people and implement them in the business in all the different ways and the different little cracks and gaps that we have all the time, to allow us to grow and to get better.
I definitely agree with you, especially with people having so much interest nowadays and talents. And, gone are the days where you sort of box people, this is a technical person, this is an individual contributor, this is the person who has more of the psychology background. People have so many multi-dimensional skills, interests, abilities. And we don't even know what's going to happen with the Gen Zs and the generation behind them and how they infiltrate technology and how they're going to work. But Chris, I know you talk about 7 pillars often. Can you walk us through your 7 pillars of strategy and share which pillar you feel companies struggle with the most?
So this is a question I get very often, and really the one that they struggle with the most. It is very dependent on the company, and I'd certainly tell you the one that I think people should think about going after the most. But really, when I show up in an organization, there isn't like, oh, it's always this one. There's always one, at least, sometimes two or three, where they're struggling. But the 7 are transparency, positive leadership, which we talked about earlier, about focusing on what's working, measurement, knowing how to deal with mistakes, recognition, listening. Those are the 7 that organizations need to be really good at. I'm happy to pick one, or I don't know if there was one that you heard that you went, oh, I want to hear more about that. I'm happy to kind of dive into that one as well.
Yeah, I'm curious about listening. What do you mean by listening?
Yeah, so the best organizations listen to all of the people in their atmosphere of running that business. So are they really good at running surveys and listening to their people, listening to make changes, listening to make them happy, listening so they can create new innovations, right? Are they really good at listening to their clients? Right? Again, find new innovations, find new products, find ways to make changes. Do they really spend that time to listen to them as well? Not everything a business does is going to be connected to listening to clients. There's certainly some great examples of innovators that could see what we were going to need, and clients often tell you what they need right now, not what they're going to need in a year. Henry Ford said, if I asked my clients, what they wanted, they would have asked me for a better horse or something like that, right?
Yes.
Certainly Steve Jobs, would have just given everybody, another calculator or something, right? Wouldn't have been. So there are people that have to innovate and ignore that. But there's a huge amount of those smaller innovations and that ability to continue to have progress and growth by listening really well to our clients about what they're talking about right now, or hearing their problems, and maybe taking that, maybe we're going to go and create the next big thing to deal with that. But one of the things that I challenge organizations to do is to think about how do they listen more often at a faster rate and a faster pace. And so one of the things that my organization got pretty famous for doing was we used to do a 1-question survey to all of our employees every single week. So I ditched the 52 questions at the end of the year, right? And replaced it with 1 every week. And what that did is I asked them a question on Wednesday, let's say. They had until usually Friday or Monday usually it was Friday. I'd ask them Wednesday, by Friday at the end of the day, they were supposed to have given me their answer. And then on Tuesday, I would tell them, so Monday I'd review all that stuff. On Tuesday, I would tell the whole company, here's what I heard, and here's what I'm going to do about it. Now, sometimes those questions could be positive. They were like, who's doing an amazing job? Who's killing it for you? Who have we not recognized that we should be recognizing? It might be, where are we failing? Or what is it we could be doing better? Or my favorite one was, how am I as your CEO getting in your way? And so I would tell them, this is what I'm hearing and this is what we're going to do about it. And then I would ask them a new question on Wednesday. Now, when people actually answered and I actually told them what I heard, and I actually showed them I was going to do something about it, that they get very excited about, because they're like, okay, well, every week I can actually tell them what I'm thinking. And that ebbs and flows for employees, as opposed to asking them once a year, and you might get them when they're in a bad mood, or a lot of companies ask their employees in January when
Yes.
It's cold in a lot of places. The holidays are over. They're broke. They've all gone sober. They've, have all of these goals, and like they're pretty grumpy in January. Like,
Yes.
right? January is a pretty grumpy place to be in an office. And like, oh, let's do a survey now and ask you how you're doing. Stupid. Then like once a month we had a company-wide meeting, and at that company-wide meeting, I would review all of the questions we had asked in that last month, and again reiterate what we heard, and again reiterate the updates since then of everything that we did or didn't do or changed or whatever it was, to so they heard us. I mean, we had one time we asked the question of like, who should we be recognizing that we're not? And like people overwhelmingly were like, Sally is the best. Like, you guys don't realize how important Sally is. And it was like, okay, well, like half the company was like, Sally's the most amazing person ever. And we didn't see it. We didn't really recognize that. And so like we did something really special for her, right? We gave her like 2 days off. We sent her to a spa, with her spouse, and like we did a little thing. And so people were like really happy that we recognized her. We did something nice for her. And now she's on our radar in this larger organization of like, she's a star. Right. So we did something with that, not just like, oh, Sally's great. Okay.
Or
Right.
you write on Slack, kudos
Yeah.
to Sally.
Right. Half the company just said you're awesome. Kudos. Right. And she's like, okay. I mean, it's nice to be recognized. I mean, that's one of my pillars is recognition. But like, if there are just a time and a place to do something bigger,
Right.
So, that's the way listening can really work for organizations. And whether you're doing well or whether you're struggling, being better at listening is always going to help you.
I like that. I like what you described. I'm also wondering, how about those companies that are like, we have a research and development team. That's their job, to figure out what's happening on the market with products, services, our team. But it seems like your listening strategy is a way to also innovate and come up with new ideas within your organization. Can you do both? Can you have a research and development team and also listen to your team and try to get ideas?
Well, often a true innovation team in a larger organization has to be completely separate from everybody else. So Google has Alphabet, and they literally have this like separate company that's in a different place, doing with totally different budget. Like, it's really hard to be truly radically innovative if you're stuck in the machine, because the machine is like, how do we keep doing what we're doing? How do we keep making money? How do we keep this cash cow going? You need people like that, and we need to be thinking about how do we do that. So often innovation has to be its own separate thing. Can we be innovative, though, by asking questions and listening? Yes, of course, right? That's an important part. And many times we find big discoveries and we find big things. Kodak knew about digital film. In fact, they had worked on it, right?
Yes.
Right? They knew all about it. So innovation wasn't the problem for Kodak, right? They understood it. They knew it. They had a good grasp on the technology. The problem was film was the cash cow. And so someone up top wasn't brave enough to say, we need to make this shift. Blockbuster knew all about streaming.
Yes.
And they chose not to do it. They chose not to get in that business because their cash cow was so big and because they had real estate and all this stuff. So it's often not that we don't know.
Right.
It's that we can't remove ourselves from that cash cow and make that shift in our business. And so that's why we often need those separate innovation groups or teams or whatever. And then they go and start actually a separate business to address that thing that we've identified. Had Blockbuster started a completely separate streaming company, right, that they owned and developed it separately, and then it started getting traction and was doing well, then they could have then made the shift or made it a part of, right, and that would have worked, but they didn't do that. So it's it's really interesting how we think about how to apply that innovation if we want it to really work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I loved all those examples you shared because I think we've all come to learn that we could not ignore innovation as much as our cash cow is doing amazing and so forth, because Netflix is right now benefiting from Blockbuster's inability to sort of consider the innovation of their time.
Absolutely.
Chris, you have led thousands of employees and you've been crowned with award winning companies. What personal lessons did you learn about leadership during your journey that you can share with our listeners?
I'm sorry, what did I learn about leadership for what?
What personal lessons have you learned about leadership?
Um, One of the things that I had to really shift back when we changed the culture was I had to get in the habit of doing a couple things. The first one was getting in the habit of saying yes. Yes, and yes, but. I was sort of got into this habit of almost saying no or being critical or putting up walls or like, we've tried that, we've done that. There was some version of me not wanting to do things because I was so busy, because we were already doing so many things, and because there was a million reasons why not to. Very, very, very good ideas, the top ideas, yes, always could filter through that. But the average employee kind of coming in with this random idea, I think they kind of started to feel like the organization was not really going to think about it, not really going to move. And so we had to get in the habit of saying yes and being really curious about what does that mean, and taking that 5 minutes to have that conversation with that employee and say, cool, what does that mean? What would happen if we did that? Right? Or why don't you go back and like get a couple people together and think about it and decide if it is a good idea, and come back to us with like more of a concrete idea. Like, how do we say yes and give them a little bit of momentum to try to go and keep that idea rolling, as opposed to, well, we've done that before, or like, we just launched 5 new initiatives, like there's no way we're even going to think about anything this quarter. Like, and because people start feeling like if they're going to keep hearing no, then what's
Right.
the point of coming up
Share.
with new ideas and sharing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, the second thing was that I had to stop giving people the answer, even if I knew it. Now, unless they were going to make $1 million mistake or they were going to do something illegal, they would come in and ask me for my opinion, or ask me what I thought, or ask me for approval, and I would just for an entire year, every single time I would say, what do you think we should do? How do you want to handle it? What do you think is the best way to proceed? Even if I was like in my head going, please pick door B, and they would pick door A, and I was like, oh, they're going to go screw it up. But you know what? They went and they screwed it up, and they came back and they learned and they were better for it. And after that, I had been running the organization for like 8-9 years. And so we had 8 or 9 years of really bad habits of them just coming to me all the time. So it took me a year to undo that. If you're in a newer business, that's not going to take you that long. But after that year, then they started coming to me and saying, hey, I decided we should do this. Here's why. And, here's what we did. Or, hey, I decided to do this. Didn't work out. And they would share and that's the mistakes pillar. They would share what they learned about the mistake they made, and then tell me what they were doing already to correct it. Like, they were already, like, by the time it got to me, they've already made the decision. They've already made a pivot, and they're already on to the next thing. And I'm getting filled in. Like, that's fantastic. Right? Because otherwise it was getting stuck with me. Like, well, what's the right thing to do? Well, I don't know. I need more information. Can you give me a report? Can you tell me what the client said? Like, then all of a sudden I'm slowing down the whole process. And only so many decisions can come into my office every day. I can only make so many decisions every day. And then when I am forced to decide which ones I'm going to make the highest priority ones, leaving a lot of these other mid to low ones just sort of hanging there all the time. And then people get frustrated and all that. So it's really interesting if you can get yourself in that habit of what happens when you and your people feel kind of like invigorated that you trust them to make the decision, right?
Exactly. Well said. And I love all those lessons and advice you have shared with us, Chris. It's been a pleasure having you on our show today. And as you said earlier, culture is strategy. I would like you to give us your final remarks before we close. It's been a pleasure learning about your tips, your 7 pillars, and we'll love any last minute advice you have for any executive or leader that's listening today.
I would say just pick one thing that you heard today and go do it. Improvement is about getting better, like 1% better every day or 1% better every week. It's not about trying to go from 0 to 100 or 30% improvement this month. Like think about how do you get better 1% at a time, right? Small incremental changes. When you go back and you look 6 months back, right, and you've been doing small incremental changes, all of a sudden you're not going to recognize who you are or what the department looks like or how much better your team has gotten by just trying to focus on small changes. That's how we got world-class customer service. That's how we got to being a fastest growing company 5 times, I think. Like that's how we got that success, by thinking about how to get better a little bit at a time, all the time.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Chris. Also, I forgot to ask, where should people connect with you if they want to follow up with the amazing work or your businesses are doing? Where would you like them to connect with you?
Few things. They can text 33777 and put my name Chris as the message. You can get on my mailing list. I'll send you, if you want, you don't have to be on my mailing list. I'll send you a PDF with like the different meeting types, 25 starter questions if you want to start doing the 1 question a week. I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on all the things. So wherever you hang out, I'm there. I think most of my handles are Chris P. Dyer 7, except for TikTok, which is chrisdyer.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. It's been amazing for sure. And everyone, thank you for listening to us today. Until next time, take care. Bye bye.